Happy Friday afternoon. It's a good time for a Q&A after I finished all my writing for the week. Thank God that's all done. This is the one that's up today. I really wanted to close the book on what was a season worth writing about. And what did I tell you guys every single week of this winding journey? I said that every football season, especially the one that we're currently witnessing right now, is like a novel, and every game is an individual chapter. Never get too high, never get too low, because you don't know what the next chapter will bring. Well, we saw 20 chapters of 49ers football this year, and that's just counting the games. If you have the preface, if you have the prologue, whatever else you want to count before chapter one. And that obviously included the wild 2021 offseason. That obviously included OTAs, training camp, the preseason. Remember that game against the Raiders at Levi Stadium? That seems like forever ago when Trey Lance and Jimmy Garoppolo were rotating in and out of the huddle. When you talk about the regular season and the playoffs specifically, the 49ers played 20 games. So they gave us 20 chapters, and we have never seen that many chapters in 49ers history. It was the longest season ever, which is pretty cool. 20 chapters. Also, we saw an NFL record 12 road games. No other team had played 12 road games in a season until the 49ers did this year. That's because they obviously had the extra road game for the 17th game of the season. That was the one at Cincinnati. That was the 9th. And then they played a wild card game at Dallas. They played a divisional round playoff game at Green Bay, and they played the NFC Championship at LA. So 12 road games, but maybe we should put an asterisk around it, right? Because two of those games were in LA. So SoFi Stadium was essentially home, and the 49ers went 1-1 in those. And that's how I finished up this article. Might as well scroll down to the bottom. You can see how long this one is right here. Kyle Shanahan said it. What our fans did in LA was not just the coolest thing for the head coach of the Niners. It was one of the coolest things I've seen in sports. To watch the commitment of a fan base try to go and take over another stadium, to go in there and see the stadium, it gave me, it gave our players, it gave us chills. And I think that's what the 49ers season did. It was a roller coaster ride that gave people chills. I mean, I had to compare it to Free Solo, as you see here in the first couple paragraphs. That's a movie made by National Geographic about Alex Honnold, who's a complete, I mean, he's psycho, but he's a badass. He climbs rock faces without a rope. And El Capitan in Yosemite is the largest piece of rock on Earth. It's 3,000 feet, the largest kind of just exposed sheer granite that there is. And Free Solo is a documentary about this guy trying to climb El Capitan without a rope. Now, I've heard that The Alpinist is a different movie about a rock climber. I've heard it's even crazier. I haven't seen it yet. I'll check it out. But as far as finding a metaphor for the 49ers season, I felt it was like watching Alex Honnold in Free Solo try to climb up El Capitan with nothing but his bare hands and some chalk on his hands. I felt there were several times that the 49ers were in impossible, precarious positions where they're just sitting there dangling off the cliff, and somehow, some way, they kept on going. Now, obviously, your palms got sweaty watching this whole ride, just like they would if you had watched Free Solo. Obviously, for the 49ers, there was a slip at some point, and I'm not going to ruin the movie, so you can go ahead and watch it. I'm not going to tell you what happens to Alex Honnold in the movie, but we do know how the 49ers story ended in 2021, and obviously in the calendar year 2022, they slipped, they fell, their dreams died, but they're going to start climbing again in 2022. And that's just a few months away. It's already February 4th of this year. So the season's going to kick off, probably around September 4th of 2022. So that is a good, I want to say 7 months. Wow, that's crazy. Just over half a year away before they start trying to climb that rock face again. And that's the glory of sports. That's the glory of football. You get knocked down, you get kicked below the belt, as George Kittle said, but then you get to get up and move forward. So yesterday I put out a big video. It took up over an hour of analysis roster-wise for the 49ers. So many guys are free agents, pending free agents. So many roster personnel questions, so many salary cap questions, and all of those are going to be answered over the course of the next several months. But if you're following this channel, as all you are right now, I hope you're all subscribed. If you're not, make sure you hit that button. You know that we're going to get into this more in depth than anybody. We're going to predict stuff. We're going to use our logic. We're going to use data. We're going to use game tape. I'm already chopping up a bunch of Trey Lance game tape. We're going to have a video that goes through all of his throws from this season, and we're going to see what it means for the 49ers moving forward. We're going to use all the information we have, and we're going to intelligently break it down and process it so that way we can cover the 49ers offseason in the smartest way possible. So subscribe to the channel. Yesterday's video was the first foray at the offseason. We talked for over an hour about the holes in the roster and how the 49ers might fill them position by position. And I promised you all a Q&A. So the Q&A starts right now, and I pre-scheduled this one, so we already had some questions to start this, and we're going to go to Terrence first. What timeline deadlines are we looking at for a Garoppolo trade? Do you have a guess as to when a deal will be announced? Well, the 49ers do indeed decide to go through with this, because we always have to add a caveat to everything, because John Lynch and Kyle Shanahan really made it sound that the 49ers are still in evaluation mode. But if they do indeed decide to go through with this, I would think they would like to get a trade done in principle as soon as possible. There obviously could be complicating factors that make that not happen. And one of those can be the potential Aaron Rodgers situation. If Aaron Rodgers is making a stink again, and if he really did agree with the Green Bay Packers last year when he did decide to come back to them for the 2021 season, that if he wanted out, then they would allow him to, pursue a trade, then you could have a situation in which the league and the teams that are waiting to fill quarterback positions are waiting on Aaron Rodgers. And in that case, I think it would slow down the market for all quarterbacks. But as of right now, and I'm going to make a whole separate video about this so we don't belabor this too much, but as of right now, there's going to be a market for Jimmy Garoppolo if the 49ers choose to pursue it, because there are so many teams needing a veteran quarterback. And with that in mind, you have to look at previous examples of teams needing veteran quarterbacks. And I know that people love making the Jimmy Garoppolo, Alex Smith comparison. The 49ers have made the Garoppolo, Lance, Smith, Mahomes comparison themselves as a model for their current situation. So you could look back at the two times that Alex Smith was traded. And the second time that Alex Smith was traded was probably the biggest parallel to what we see now, right? He was traded to Washington from Kansas City. And that one happened fairly early on in the process. I believe that happened sometime in February, because they could only agree to the deal in principle. The new league year starts in the middle of March. That's when free agents can officially be signed and trades can officially be consummated. Before then, you can agree to a trade in principle, but it's not signed on the dotted line at that point. So I do think that if the 49ers do decide to move forward with this, and if their evaluation that they're supposedly undergoing right now ends up leading to the same results that Jimmy Garoppolo thinks it will lead to, and that means that the 49ers decide that they need to have money to pay Deebo Samuel and Nick Bosa, well, then I think they're going to want to get a trade done sooner rather than later. So I think their timeline would be for something to happen in February. But then again, sometimes you can't decide your own timeline. Sometimes you're at the mercy of the rest of the league. From Nate Thomas, can you explain why trading McGlinchey to running back with Compton isn't the smartest idea? Do people actually think this? I'm sure Nate doesn't, and Nate asks really good questions, but I don't get on social media just to browse random theories and stuff, because I think it would drive me crazy. And if this is one of them, then I would tell people to put on the game tape from the NFC Championship game. The 49ers had major offensive line issues in the NFC Championship game, to the point where Trey Lance, might be hurt at this point had he been playing in that game. Jimmy Garoppolo played hurt and somehow came out of that game, I think, decently okay. I mean, he was able to walk after. But, man, a 21-year-old rookie behind the offensive line that the 49ers fielded in that NFC Championship game, it won't get much better for him when he's 22 next year. Let's put it that way. It is even more important that the 49ers have a plus pass-protecting offensive line in front of Trey Lance than it was with Jimmy Garoppolo, because Lance doesn't get rid of the ball as quickly as Jimmy. Jimmy has one of the quickest releases in the league. Obviously, he's a veteran. Obviously, he can see the field. And obviously, that led to a lot of 49ers wins over the past several seasons. Lance will get destroyed if the 49ers play the same type of pass protection that they did against the Rams. Now, there are good reasons or plausible reasons for why the 49ers struggled up front, one of which was that their best player, Trent Williams, actually played on a high ankle sprain. Williams hardly gives up a pressure a game, but this game he gave up 5. He just got backed into Garoppolo time and time again. If we want to focus this specifically on the right tackle spot, well, Tom Compton got frequently backed into Jimmy Garoppolo even when he was healthy. Compton is a great run blocker, but Compton is not a great pass blocker. There are limits to what Tom Compton can do, and those limits lie in the realm of pass protection. On top of that, the right guard next to Compton was also a below-average pass protector this year in Daniel Brunskill. He's going to be a restricted free agent. Alex Mack did a good job at center, but he's 36. He's going to be 37 next year, and he might retire. We don't know. He's still deciding what to do. And obviously, Laken Tomlinson at left guard is going to be a free agent. So as you can see, the entire line for the 49ers is in a state of flux, is in a state of question. And they did not play good football against the Rams. They were dominated in the run game, and they were dominated in the pass game. So anybody who watched the NFC Championship game would say, I think Trent Williams probably needs to get healthy, and I think the 49ers probably need to get Mike McGlinchey back. Because McGlinchey was an above-average pass protector until he tore his quad this year. It hadn't been the case in the previous seasons, but McGlinchey had actually worked on his game, put on about 20 to 25 pounds, and was anchoring the right tackle spot well. And I'll tell you right now, the 2022 season and seasons beyond will be unmitigated disasters if the 49ers do not pass protect properly for Trey Lance. It is a very casual football point of view to say, oh, just because this guy can run, you don't need a good pass protection. Well, Patrick Mahomes can run. Look what happened when he didn't have good pass protection in last season's Super Bowl. He got completely annihilated. In fact, when you don't have good pass protection, you almost would rather just have the pocket passing, quick release guy, because at least he's going to get rid of the ball and he's not going to get murdered back there. So the 49ers do need to shore up this offensive line. And step one is not starting Tom Compton at right tackle. For all the good that he did in run blocking this year, the 49ers had to help him. They had to scheme around him in pass protection. They had to play max protect. What Jimmy Garoppolo got hurt on a max protect play with Tom Compton at right tackle. Danico Autry beat George Kittle, who was back in on max protect. So two things. Your quarterback got hurt. It might have derailed the season, right? Because a healthy Garoppolo, they probably beat the Rams. They're probably a little bit better than the Rams if Jimmy's healthy in that NFC Championship game. But not only did your quarterback get hurt on that play, but one of your top receivers couldn't run a pass pattern because you didn't trust your right tackle in pass protection. So there's so many reasons why the 49ers need to have solid tackle play. That's why they spent so much on Trent Williams, both in a trade and in the contract, and also why they spent so much on Mike McGlinchey. They used the 9th overall pick on the guy because tackles are valuable. In Shanahan's scheme, they're indispensable. You have to have premier tackles to be able to block in space in the run game and pass protect for Trey Lance moving forward. Another one from Terrence. What kind of contract, if any, do you see San Francisco giving Mostert? Well, if he's healthy enough, I do think that the 49ers sign him to a 1-year deal. I think it's going to be hard for Mostert to ink something that's longer than a 1-year deal. He's on the wrong side of 30 at this point, and he's coming off another season that was marred by an injury. Mostert got the 3-year contract from the 49ers when he was coming from being a gunner and a reserve running back into that starting role. And about halfway through that contract, right, the 49ers needed to adjust it because Mostert was upset. His agent was upset that he had signed it as a special teamer and was then, a record-breaking running back. And I get that all. They guaranteed part of the contract. That situation was resolved. But the truth of the matter is that at this age, when you haven't been consistently available as a running back, it's going to be really hard to get a multi-year deal. Now, in the case of Raheem Mostert, we have to be fair here. And he is extremely, extremely important to the 49ers offense. Their running game suffered in 2021 without that gliding speed that Raheem Mostert has. You can say and compare Elijah Mitchell to Mostert until you're blue in the face, as blue as the shirt right here. but he's not Raheem Mostert. He can hit the outside zone nice. I mean, Mitchell's a nice piece. He's a good rookie. He's tough. He played through like 6 injuries this year. Future is bright for Elijah Mitchell. But Raheem Mostert adds a different dimension that nobody else in the National Football League can. Now, that was before Mostert's injury. Will that knee surgery that he underwent this year, will that all heal well? Will that all be in place to where he still has that same burst? If that is the case, I think that you bring him back for a 1-year deal to the 49ers because I think he's worth it to Shanahan's outside zone scheme. Luke Luna, do they move Lenoir to K'Waun Williams' spot to try to re-sign Tart if it's reasonable, but let K'Waun Williams go and try to secure Lakin and DJ Jones? Maybe bring in a cheaper vet if asking too much. Okay, a lot of moving pieces here in Luke's question. First of all, I didn't think that K'Waun Williams was as good this year as he had been in the past, and maybe that shouldn't be surprising because he turned 30 before this season. So, you can keep on playing the 1-year deal game, which they did with Tart, which they did with K'Waun Williams, Dante Johnson, those guys last year. But defensive backs, especially where quickness is so important, are going to be losing a step at around those ages. And for a guy in the slot playing a lot against Cooper Kupp, it's really important to keep the quickness and it's important to stay healthy. So I do wonder what the 49ers do with K'Waun. Do they think they could squeeze one more year out of it? Or, is there some other team that's going to overpay and bring him in for 2 or 3 years? Because I really think that bringing and signing a player that's on the wrong side of 30, who I thought was declining at least a tad this year, to a multi-year deal wouldn't be smart. So at that point, you have to ask yourself, is Deommodore Lenoir ready to play in the slot? Because I don't really see the slot as being easier than the outside cornerback positions. In fact, it might be harder, especially in the NFC West. Cooper Kupp lines up in the slot 64% of the time. So, he's the best receiver in football, one of the best receivers in football, and he's lining up in the slot. Well, your slot cornerback better be good. So that being said, you either trust Lenoir enough to jettison K'Waun Williams, you move Lenoir inside, or you run a timeshare, right? You hope Lenoir develops and you sign K'Waun to 1 more year to make that work, or you use one of your more valuable draft picks on somebody who could be really good. But again, we've seen even higher draft picks could take time to develop at cornerback. So it's a tricky spot. Maybe the 49ers look for a bargain there. This, though, comes back to them being a rush over coverage team. So this is the second part of your question. If the 49ers believe that they can mask coverage deficiencies, including a 31-year-old K'Waun Williams at nickelback or a rookie Deommodore Lenoir at nickelback through the pass rush, well, that means that you better as hell get all of your defensive linemen back in the fold for 2022. And that leads me to the DJ Jones question that you have there below. I absolutely believe that given the way the 49ers are constructed, they do need to prioritize re-signing DJ Jones. He's going to be expensive, but if you're going to skimp on the secondary, which I think is clear that the 49ers will do, I don't even know if they're going to get in their outside corner. They might run it back with Ambry Thomas and Emmanuel Mosley and, maybe bring in a guy like Dante Johnson to be that insulation. And there's nothing wrong with that plan if you're overpowering up front. If the corners are good enough and you're overpowering up front, well, okay, that's how this team is built. Okay, then. You better be overpowering up front. You can't just rely on Javon Kinlaw or your defense is quicksand at that point, right? If it's Kinlaw and Armstead inside and Kinlaw gets hurt again, you're screwed. Who's playing the 3 technique for the 49ers, right? So who's playing the 2-eye? DJ Jones and Armstead is a great start. That's a durable start. That's a 2-tackle combination that was among the league's best in run stopping this year that could also rush the passer when need be. Why don't you use that as runway for Javon Kinlaw? So re-sign DJ Jones, whatever it takes, bring this guy back, use that as runway for Javon Kinlaw so there's not immense pressure for him to be the guy. And then you can cross the next bridges when you get to them, including the fact that, bolstered by the fact that Eric Armstead can play the 5 technique. Eric Armstead loves playing defensive end on base downs before kicking inside on inside down. So I absolutely see a defensive line that includes Kinlaw on base downs, Armstead on base downs on the outside, DJ Jones obviously on base downs on the inside. And then when you kick Armstead in, either Kinlaw or Jones or both of them come off the field. But it could happen on a rotational basis depending on matchups. So You can never have too many good defensive linemen. I do not know, though, how much K'Wan Williams is going to command. It's going to be really interesting. There might be a sucker team out there that tries to overpay him. And in that case, I don't think the 49ers should match, so they can make sure they prioritize guys like DJ Jones and maybe Laken Tomlinson, because I don't know how else they're going to upgrade or at least tread water at left guard. I mean, offensive line is a concern this offseason. What position do you think the 49ers should go in the draft? Surely the defensive backfield, offensive line, freshen up the edge rush. I go trenches. I think that you've got star power at receiver. Obviously, you have star power at tight end. You obviously used a pick on quarterback last year. You used two picks on the defensive backfield last season. I think you have star power at linebacker. I think good football is won or lost in the trenches. The Rams whipped the 49ers up front. It's hard for me to even imagine that I'm saying that right now, because over 6 consecutive meetings before, the 49ers had whipped the Rams up front. But what happened is that LA's defensive line controlled the 49ers offensive line in both the run and the pass game. They turned the tables on them in the NFC Championship game. And defensively, as good as the 49ers were on that D line, especially toward the end of the year, the Rams did find a way to run in that first half. And that changed the game. The Rams had an 18-play, 97-yard drive, which tells me that the 49ers weren't as dominant as the 2019 defense. We talked all about them improving. And would they be as good as 2019? At the end of the day, they fell short. And they fell short on both lines of scrimmage. So I think that you got to focus on bolstering that line of scrimmage moving forward. Assuming Jimmy Garoppolo is gone this offseason, who plays backup to Lance? Nate Sudfeld, another rookie, a veteran free agent. I think the 49ers get a veteran, but who? Well, I talked about this in the roster breakdown yesterday. So for those of you just joining, make sure you subscribe to the channel. Go and check out the roster breakdown. It's a whole offseason preview. We got a ton of content rolling in. The 49ers, before they drafted Lance, were interested in bolstering the quarterback room through different avenues, right? That they ultimately decided to swing for the fences, trade up, grab Lance. But at one point, it was a potential possibility that they signed somebody like Andy Dalton, who's going to be a free agent again this offseason. If you can find a quarterback that, for the backup role that fits into the correct budget, that can help the 49ers have insulation to Trey Lance and to be a mentor for Trey Lance in the room, because it's never a bad thing to continue to have a mentor. The guy was 21 this year, going to be 22 next year. So he's still going to be a, young spring chicken there. So you have to think about improving the veteran credibility of the room. And I don't think that Nate Sudfeld suddenly has surged from third string semi-project to legitimate quarterback that you trust with the game on the line in Green Bay or wherever. And I think you want to have one of those guys if possible, because the quarterback position is the most important on the field. And the 49ers emphasized the importance of insulation there. So that being said, somebody like Dalton, somebody mentioned Teddy Bridgewater to me the other day. You want a name like that, but a name like Bridgewater would be way, way too expensive, in my opinion. So somebody like Dalton, who only made $3 million a year for the Dallas Cowboys 2 seasons ago, but then signed for $13 million with the Bears this past season, but now was way on the tail end of his career, maybe that would fit. And I'm not naming him specifically, but I'm thinking that somebody like that could give the 49ers the insulation that they need if Garoppolo is indeed gone. All right. Is it just me, or is that the most sentimental goodbye from a quarterback ever? He's not even retiring. Well, it was extremely sentimental. And I think it illustrates how much this 49ers team, how much they loved each other. I think that there was genuine appreciation for teammates. And I'm posting this right now in the comment section. So go ahead and check out the chat section. That's the link to my article. You can click on The Athletic. This was a 2,500 word postmortem on the season, talking about how the 49ers pushed the edge. And I try to make it as all encapsulating as possible. And one of the themes was what Kyle Juszczyk said here. Read this. As a competitor and an athlete, you always want to shoulder as much as you can. But I learned this year that I have a whole locker room of guys that could take on a lot themselves. I'm surrounded by really tough, gritty, resilient people. It's not just on me. I can truly rely on my teammates. And then a little bit later, Emmanuel Mosley to Jaquaski Tart, who was hanging his head in the locker room. I told him that one play doesn't define him. He's not the reason we lost. Everyone had plays in that game that they want to have back. I have multiple plays in that game I want to have back. Everyone in that locker room felt that they were the reason we lost, and that's why we are the team that we are. And then I added to that. As their dreams unraveled, the 49ers maintained the attitude that they'd exhibited with those hopes when those hopes had been resurrected earlier in the season. Credit for the roller coaster's ups and blame for its downs went to one common entity, the team. Normally, stuff like this is cliche. It's lip service, blah, blah, all this, all that. But I think with this 49ers squad, it was true. There was a sense of camaraderie and brotherhood that you don't see at that level in professional football all too often. I think the 49ers did get that college-like vibe in their locker room this year to where those guys really, really did appreciate and love each other. And it's one of those things where it's not just a business at that point anymore when those business transaction happens. Obviously, when the transactions happen, there is the business component that drives them. But the emotions that come with those transactions or potential transactions in the case of a Jimmy Garoppolo trade, the emotion that comes with them is going to be reflective of the bonds and the brotherhood that was built in the locker room. So I think and I hope that that answers your question. Hey, David, if you had to predict what would be your expected draft compensation for Jimmy if and when the 49ers do trade him? I really do think that you could expect something like a second round pick at the very least. The 49ers are shrewd and they play the market against themselves and they accentuate what I think can be accentuated with Jimmy Garoppolo. And they, that market could work in their favor. Perhaps they can put a conditional tag on that pick and get something a little bit better. But the truth is that Garoppolo is 30 now. So he's not, the reason that Sam Darnold was able, and even Carson Wentz were able to command, relative fortunes for, really lacking play in the past, right? With both of those quarterbacks is because there was hope from prospective suitors that they could harness their physical talent, which was younger than Garoppolo's, and mold them into prodigious quarterbacks. And that's why there was that much draft capital given up. Now, it's not all based on age and physical talent. And I think Garoppolo does have some physical talent. That release is nothing to be scoffed at. He's accurate. He obviously has a lot of the intangibles that you'd want. So there's a lot to like about Jimmy Garoppolo, a lot the 49ers have obviously liked about Jimmy Garoppolo. It's just that I think the age is one of the limiting factors in what a potential trade return might be. I do think that all things considered, when I balance all that out, you might be able to get a couple picks and maybe something that includes a second rounder. And again, if you commit some highway robbery, if you're John Lynch, maybe you get a conditional tag on one of those picks. And if Jimmy Garoppolo plays 14 games or 15 games at least next season, or takes a team to the playoffs, maybe that pick turns into something a little bit more valuable. Thank you to Lion2Star. What can Shanahan do to break through these late comeback losses? Well, first of all, he can get better luck. Jaquaski Tart dropping that interception wasn't Shanahan's fault. That's just tough for the 49ers because I thought that they were in pretty good position, even if he did punt from the 50. But I also do think that Shanahan can become a little bit better with the probabilities of fourth down decisions. If you want to point something at Shanahan specifically that is relating to game day X's and O's, the 49ers punted from plus territory 3 times in an NFC championship game. The math didn't like that. The probability table didn't like that any single one of those times. Each time the recommendation would have been to go for it. And I thought that the 49ers, when they had 2nd and 1, that turned into 3rd and 2, that turned into 4th and 2, that turned into a punt, that was a bad sequence. It preceded the Tart dropped interception, but they could have put their foot on the throat of the Rams, and they didn't at that sequence in the game. So I think Shanahan probably needs to get a little bit better there. But, as far as the larger picture, as far as building a roster, where Shanahan and Lynch really, really need to continue putting more resources, because they're not at the replacement level for a Super Bowl contender yet, is the offensive line. The pass protection wasn't good enough in the Super Bowl. The pass protection wasn't good enough to beat the Rams in the NFC Championship game. That's a combination of frontline talent and depth, because you're going to have injuries, right? And they had Trent Williams playing on the high ankle sprain. Their other tackle, Mike McGlinchey, was out. I mean, they went in and beat the Rams with 2 backup tackles in Week 18. That was a near miracle, I thought, in the final week of the regular season for the 49ers to do that. So they were able to kind of skate by on thin ice once, and it didn't happen with Trent Williams on the high ankle sprain. So I think for Shanahan to get over the hump, I think that further investment in that offensive line, which the 49ers, they made heavy investments in the line this past offseason. I mean, they went out and they got Trent Williams to stay with the big money. That was a record. They went out and they paid Alex Mack. They went out and they drafted Aaron Banks. They went out and they drafted Jalen Moore. Unfortunately, only really 2 of those 4 investments paid off for them immediately this season. Williams and Mack paid off for them, and then only 1 of those 4 was effective in the NFC Championship game. They would have needed at least 2 of those 4. They needed Williams to be better, and I can guarantee you they wanted Aaron Banks to be much better than he was. They want him to actually crack the lineup, because the biggest weakness throughout the year on the offensive line was at right guard, and that's where they drafted Aaron Banks. So I think to get into a position where they're closing out championships more consistently, the 49ers need a better offensive line and a more consistent offensive line. It's going to be even more important with a youngster and Trey Lance being that quarterback. Okay, let's see. Jimmy will have a better chance to win if he goes to Tampa. At least their DBs won't drop INTs. Tampa would be interesting, the pairing with Bruce Arians. I should do a recap of my 2021 offseason predictions. My 2021 offseason predictions look pretty good. If I remember, we could look at my mock draft. But back at this time last year, I remember I was in New Orleans in January of 2021, and I wrote a piece that said the 49ers need to look at this kid from North Dakota State. They need to insulate the quarterback room. Jimmy Garoppolo's been hurt. It's been an issue. They need somebody to push Jimmy. They need to bring in Trey Lance. I said that over a year ago. This was way before the trade. So it was my recommendation at the time that they have this dual thing going on in the quarterback room. We'll see what continues and what doesn't moving forward. But that obviously was my big prediction of the offseason. And I also projected that the 49ers would sign Alex Mack. That happened. I predicted that they would re-sign Trent Williams. I don't think that was hard. That did happen. And I predicted that they would draft Elijah Mitchell. So I think, I mean, that's a pretty good run, right? I had Lance right. I had Mitchell right. I had Williams right. And I had Mack right. Maybe I had something else right. I don't know. But I don't usually get all too specific with predictions. But with those 4, I did. And those worked out. So I got to give myself some credit. I'll go back and look at them. And maybe we could do a separate show. And we'll go from there. The international exception is tough. Because if you look at Alfredo Gutierrez, he's got a huge body that doesn't really fit what the 49ers want schematically. He's like an old school tackle from the 80s. So they brought him back. I think he's a great guy to have in the locker room and on the practice field. But as far as tackles for Shanahan's scheme, I memean, Alfredo Gutierrez is just like towering over everybody, and that includes Mike McGlinchey, who's also massive. So I just think that he's probably a little bit too stiff to be a legitimate, NFL caliber tackle. But it's great to have him out there at the facility for the 49ers, and they definitely like his presence in the locker room, and that international exception program is cool. So he's going to be back next season. How did Aaron Banks progress over the course of this past season? Can't blame our draft department for taking a swing on a guard prospect high in the draft. It would have come in handy in an NFC championship game. Yeah, well, I mean, you can't blame the decision makers for pulling the trigger on a guard. You can be upset that the 49ers might have picked the wrong guard, right? When you had a lot of center guard hybrids available in the draft that might have been able to have an apprenticeship under Alex Mack while playing guard and then moving to center. That's what I thought the 49ers would do, but they instead went pure guard. They thought that Aaron Banks could be a mauler who could also move. They like the basketball background. They like the fact that Notre Dame ran a ton of diverse scheme stuff, and they thought that that would work in their system. And hey, maybe it still will. My criticism there was that this team was trying to win it all in 2021. And by not figuring out that offensive line to an optimal level, and I think the optimal level would have required at least one of the rookies to pan out as a starter right away. By not figuring out, the 49ers left themselves in very precarious position. And you saw that precarious position eventually come back to bite them in an NFC championship game. To answer your question, they seem to think that stuff did progress a bit for Aaron Banks, but obviously not to the level of him playing. He had to rework his body. So it was always a longer-term project, and it seems that maybe the 49ers underestimated how long of a term that project would be. Now they have a full offseason with him in an NFL weight room, so maybe he's able to come and grab that right guard spot next year. Daniel Brunskill is going to be a restricted free agent. I think you bring him back. But again, I emphasized all offseason that I thought Daniel Brunskill would be better as the 49ers utility lineman. Because if they had Brunskill as that utility lineman, well, then they would have been able to plug him in at right tackle, left tackle. I mean, think of how much better they would have been in an NFC championship game if they would have been able to have Brunskill at one of the tackle spots instead of an injured Trent Williams or Tom Compton, right? Yeah, there would have been so much less pressure on all the machinations, McKivitz, and all this the 49ers had to do. Brunskill played really well at tackle as a backup tackle in 2019, and the 49ers just were not able to replicate that dynamic this season. All right, I'm going to skip down all the way to the bottom to answer a couple more questions. We're at 37 minutes. Maybe we go, to 45 this time. Everybody watching right now, subscribe to the channel. Let's get it over 11K. Let's get it to 12K, and let's say, hey, prize for everybody, not for everybody, prize for a select viewer at 15K, select subscriber at 15K. So hit that button right now, get that alert going whenever I come live. We're going to be going deep into 49ers content this offseason, and hell, I think we already are. I'm already working on a Trey Lance every throw film breakdown I think you guys are going to like. So you might miss it if you don't subscribe. All right, I'm going all the way to the bottom to start answering some of these most recent questions. Garoppolo's trade price. This is crazy right here. This is not going to happen, but it's worth entertaining just for entertainment's sake. You know, I already said Garoppolo's trade price a little bit earlier on, maybe a second-round pick, maybe something conditional, get some more. Let's just sit back and enjoy it. Let's see. It's going to be more than some people think. It's probably less than other people think, one of those situations. Can the 49ers trade Lance, Garoppolo, and 2 first-rounders for Rodgers? Cheers from Spain, and sorry about my English. Thanks to Javier. No problem. I don't think that the Packers would want to just be grabbing both Lance and Garoppolo. I think that would be the issue. Now, what first rounders would the 49ers trade? That's the problem. You've already traded away first rounders for the right to draft Trey Lance. So that's just like why, these kind of things are hard to figure out. They also don't have much salary cap space. So how would you pay Samuel and Bosa if you had to inherit Aaron Rodgers' contract, which is like a $46 million cap hit? And even if you restructure him, I mean, it just makes your head hurt. So no, this is not going to happen just for logistical purposes, but it's fun to take the question. Only by name to answer that one. No, but it was a funny question. It was a funny question. There's a lot of like crazy rumors, on YouTube, and it's entertaining for me to address some of them every once in a while. Can the 49ers make the playoffs with Lance this upcoming season? If not, would Kyle be on the hot seat then? Shanahan won't be on the hot seat. York likes him too much. He's brought 2 NFC title game appearances and a Super Bowl appearance in 5 seasons. 2-6 if it doesn't happen next year. That's still a lot better than a whole bunch of other teams are doing. There would have to be 2 straight losing seasons for that kind of talk to actually, I think, be legitimate. But there is truth to the fact that as Trey Lance goes, so will this current 49ers regime. They have pushed so much in to the Trey Lance bucket with all the picks they drafted. And if they run Garoppolo out of town for Trey Lance, well, you've put so much into it that this guy better take you to the promised land. He better take you far into seasons at the very least. Because if he doesn't, well, then it's the people who invested all that much into him that are going to pay for it. So in the case of Trey Lance, the clock will start ticking the minute that he's named the full-time starting quarterback of the San Francisco 49ers. And it's ticking not only for Lance, it'll be ticking for Shanahan and for Lynch. And results better come at the very latest before Trey Lance's rookie deal is up, which is, a huge part of the incentive package for Shanahan and Lynch to keep Jimmy Garoppolo, to have kept Jimmy Garoppolo for the 2021 season, because you want Lance to be as ready as possible when he steps into the job. And you want to win now and win in the future. You want to do both, because this is a competitive league and these are competitive jobs. And the 49ers have won now. They made it to the NFC title game. Now we'll see what their plan is for winning in the future. Trey has horrible mechanics. DC has a slow long arm of delivery. Yes, he has a very elongated release. The 49ers feel they've tightened it up a little bit. I do think he gets velocity on some of his passes that can make up for some of the longer elongated release. So that's good from the 49ers perspective. But I mean, compared to Garoppolo, who had the tightest release that I think the 49ers had ever seen, Lance's was definitely loopier. And I don't like how he brings the ball down. He brings the ball down before he comes back up. That's going to lead to some strip sacks, I think, if he continues doing that and the 49ers don't have a good offensive line. Now, even if you can overpower a ball through the middle to Brandon Ayuk on a crosser with velocity, if that release is too loopy and too long, the pass rush can get to you before that can happen. So but again, this is all stuff the 49ers knew about Trey Lance coming out of college. There's a reason why we said Mac Jones was ready to go right away, but Trey Lance was the longer-term project. And the fact that Lance has the physical capabilities to just blow the top off of a defense, but is still really raw, the fact that both of those things are happening makes it so important that the 49ers believe in the person that is Trey Lance. You have to believe that he has it up here to be able to take the rigors of an NFL training regimen, to take the rigors of NFL coaching and be able to parlay those into the necessary improvement to succeed in this league. And I think the 49ers, they did their research on Trey Lance. And I think that Jimmy Garoppolo helped with that, because Jimmy Garoppolo obviously comes from strong blue-collar Midwest roots, FCS school, no FBS offers. Well, guess who fits the same profile? Trey Lance. There's a reason these guys started acting like brothers, because they come from the same type of background. Lance is Minnesota. Lance is North Dakota State. FCS guys moving to the NFL. So I think the 49ers think that Lance has that humble, blue-collar, hardworking mentality that will be able to take coaching, that has taken coaching, that will be able to fix some of these obvious physical deficiencies right now, right? Or I guess I should say mechanical deficiencies, because Lance doesn't have many physical deficiencies. If there's anything that I think that would help him physically, be add a little bit of muscle. And again, he was only 21 this season, so I think he will. If you add a little bit of muscle, you start looking more like Josh Allen, and you don't get hurt, if you're run too many times in a single game. Will Frank the Tank get a one-day deal so he can retire with the 49ers? I talked to Frank Gore in LA in the tunnel, and I'm not sure what he meant, but he said he wanted to be back, and I know he's said this a lot of times. So I don't know if that means a one-day deal or maybe they were going to sign him for the Super Bowl just for the hell of it if they won that game. But the 49ers weren't able to get it done. So I don't know. I think that would make the fans very happy, obviously. So that'd be good. Do I see the 49ers taking the Rams path just 1 year behind? Rams 18 Super Bowl, 19 out of the playoffs. Obviously, 2020 playoffs for the Rams, and then the 49ers were out of the playoffs. Yeah, 2021 Super Bowl for the Rams. It's possible because the Rams came in with a more ready-made roster for Sean McVay in 17 when Kyle Shanahan took over at the same time, which is why the Rams got to the Super Bowl first. The Garoppolo is better than Goff. So the Rams jettisoned their quarterback. I mean, they had to pay the Lions to take him. They're like, hey, get this guy off our hands. Here's a first-round pick for it. So they got rid of their quarterback, last year, and the 49ers obviously kept Garoppolo. So the Rams were able to get more of their tailor-made guy, Stafford, obviously, somebody that Sean McVay thought that, he'd be able to win with in there. The 49ers were in a different spot quarterback-wise. They had two guys this year they believe in, one for the short term and one for the long term. So much of your question and the answer to it is going to depend on Trey Lance moving forward. All right, I'm going to do one more. I don't pay any attention to college football. Can you explain why Lance was such a high pick when all we hear now is how little he played in college? Well, that's all I said back in the day is this guy hasn't played a lot, but that's one of the reasons why Lance was a high pick. Maybe it's ironic, maybe it's a conundrum, but it's not in this article. It's in my other article. No, we'll open it right now. I have a good line that I think that's in my Jimmy Garoppolo article right here. Right here, this paragraph might be able to answer your question. By carrying Garoppolo and Lance on their 2021 roster, the 49ers set out to accomplish two goals. And quick little side note, my girlfriend does a great job putting the 49ers into words, and she said it was like the 49ers were having surf and turf. You had, I guess in surf and turf, like you have more steak usually, right? So they had the prime rib, or they had the meat dish and Garoppolo, and then you have the lobster and Lance. So they had both. The 49ers tried to carry both this year. It's like the surf and turf plan for the 49ers. Yes, it was expensive, but by carrying both of these guys, this is what the 49ers wanted to do. They wanted to win in the now, and they knew a healthy Garoppolo could help them do that. They also wanted to set themselves up for the future, and Shanahan saw Lance's raw yet prodigious skill set as perfectly moldable clay for that objective. So that last line, I use another metaphor there, not surf and turf this time, but perfectly moldable clay. The fact that Lance was not as developed as Mac Jones, not as polished as Mac Jones, actually made him more appealing to the 49ers. Because Shanahan is so particular about his quarterbacks. Kyle is the same way as Mike was. I mean, Mike even got picky with Steve Young and John Elway. I mean, nitpicked them to death. They want something very specific, which means they want their own guy. They want that guy to develop within the mold of their plan. So Mac Jones, yeah, great. Mac Jones was polished coming out of Alabama, ready-made to start in New England. I mean, he wasn't great this year. He was okay this year. But where's the ceiling going to be for Mac Jones? Probably not too much higher than it was this season, right? Just given the physical skill set that we saw with the Patriots. Whereas a guy like Lance, you have the ability to run. You have the cannon. He's 21, so you have the ability to put on some weight to maybe do some Josh Allen-esque stuff. You have all that off-schedule ability. Also, obviously, he ran under center at North Dakota State, so the 49ers knew that he could fit within Shanahan's scheme and also expand it. But most of all, you have moldable clay. You have a player who Shanahan can take and form into what he needs specifically for the 49ers system. And because of that, I think Lance was so valuable. Because, this wasn't already a finished product. This was something that Shanahan can make sure is tailor-made for his own system. All right, guys, great questions today. Hope you enjoyed the video. If you haven't done it yet, subscribe right now. I'm going to come out with some more stuff here in just a second, maybe another video on Jimmy Garoppolo trade value, maybe a Trey Lance film breakdown. I actually promise. Both of those are coming. All right, happy Friday to everybody. Go have a drink. That's a command. Go have fun. Stop watching all these YouTube videos about the 49ers. I know that you're upset about that game on Sunday. Actually, never mind. Keep on watching these YouTube videos about the 49ers. Don't watch anything else. That's a fair compromise. Everybody take care. Thanks for your questions. Subscribe. We'll talk to you soon. Happy Friday. You all are the best.